Hi, folks. Welcome to the Prepared Homestead. This is Travis. Thank you all for stopping by to watch. I'm going to cover a few things going on in the news. Yes, the stuff with Iran and the riots and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of this video, or halfway through or so, I want to talk about something that there's been a lot of questions in the comments. I mentioned this morning and a few days ago about, like making sure you have your radio comms down, your plan for that. And I've had a lot of people ask, what's my opinion? What's your opinion on this? What's your opinion on that? So I'm going to give you some tips and some ideas on emergency radio comms. I've been a licensed ham radio operator for over 25 years. I use radios every day with being with the fire department, so I'm pretty decently aware of radio comms. I'll give you some opinions on that. And like always, it's kind of the no BS kind of opinion. So with what's going on, it's being reported that several sources in Washington, I know, I hate saying that, several sources. Who knows? Is it a bunch of baloney or what? But there are several sources being reported in Washington that are saying that they believe that there will be an attack on Iran by Israel in the coming days. This morning, the president was asked if he thought the attack was imminent. And he said, well, I don't know if I want to use the word imminent, but I do believe something's going to be happening in the next few days. He also, in that whole little interview, did not condemn Israel if they did that. And that's something that's changed. Over the past several weeks, there's been information coming from the White House that the president is unhappy with Israel in making their threats or saying that they're going to bomb them. Now he's backed away from that, and he's basically saying, this is what I've heard. Iran can't have a nuke. He said that again this morning. No matter what, they can't have a nuke. He said, we could come to this peacefully. We could do trade with them, but if they're not going to listen, they can't have a nuke. So I am leaning more towards behind closed doors. I think the United States is definitely supporting Israel in this, telling them you got the green light. Some of these sources that are being reported are also saying that they are worried that if Iran does strike back at Israel, that it would overwhelm Israel's defense capabilities, which is, I think, code word for the United States needs to be there to defend them. The State Department has issued an alert for all of the Middle East and North Africa. Travel alert, not to travel there. If you're an American citizen in those areas, you should be on alert or get out. And so things do seem to be building. My guess, and this is not a prediction at all, but my guess it'll happen probably in the next few days. Tonight, you have to understand the time difference. So when it's daytime here, it's nighttime there. A lot of things, Israel is really, I don't know exactly why, but they're really big on doing military actions on Shabbat. So I think that's probably what's going to happen. I think they're going to, in the night, when it's Shabbat there, when it's their Sabbath, that's probably what we'll see happen. I could be wrong. I mean, if I am, I am. But I think that's what we're going to see happen. And then from there on, who knows? Who knows what's going to happen after that? Probably depends on a lot of Iran's response. They may take the gloves off and say, okay, we're going to do this, or they may do like last time and try to tiptoe around and say, well, it wasn't that much of a serious attack on us, so we'll just lob a few missiles at absolutely nothing and call it good. That could be what happens. But I will say that tensions are rising right now, and probably now more than ever, Israel feels like it is justified in its actions because of the reports recently coming out about Iran having or getting very close to nuclear capability, which is something we've heard for decades now anyway. So I think that's going to be building. The governor of Texas has called up 5,000 Texas National Guard troops and 2,000 additional Texas state police to protect their interest there in Texas. There's a lot of rioting and protesting going on between Houston and Dallas and Austin. I'm sure it'll just spread. The reports online, and of course these are coming from these left organizations, so who knows how valid they are, but they're saying that this No Kings protest, which is what they're going to do on the 14th, that they're getting just slammed with tons of people signing up to be part of it, that it's going to be huge. It's going to be huge in DC, and it's going to be huge all over the country. I don't expect all of it to be violent. I expect a lot of these places that they have it to be small, the little obscure, radical people that go to the town square, 15 people standing there, and that's it. I think that's going to be the majority of it, but the possibility of there being, some significant protesting and rioting in certain areas, I think is there. And if this happens at or near the same time as attacks on Iran, well, who knows? So that's why we get ready. So I want to shift gears and talk about emergency radio comms, because there seems to still, after all these years and all the probably tens of thousands of videos, who knows, maybe more, made on radios for preppers, there still seems to be a lot of questions of what to have. And so I'm going to try to quickly go through some things. And number one, understand that I'm referring to, well, I'll be referring to both, but emergency comms, so something to have during the SHTF, and then just communications as a group, a community. And I think those are two very different things. The first thing I want to address, several people have been asking in the comments about these rapid radios. Rapid Radios is a brand. You've all probably seen the advertisements that these things will work in anything. They're the best thing since sliced bread. It's not new. It's not new technology. This is just push-to-talk radios that has been around for a long time. If you're old enough to remember the Nextel, I have an old cell phone, and it has that capability. It is based on cellular networks, okay? Regardless of what they tell you in any kind of commercial, it is based on cellular network. And so if the cellular towers are down, then the radios won't work. They're tied to that. You do have to pay an annual fee to have the service. It's not monthly, but it's annual on most of them. I don't think that the whole concept is trash. I just think that they're not a good option for SHTF prepper use, because if the grid goes down or if there's attacks on the communication systems, then they won't work. There's also an annual service fee, and if you don't pay that for whatever reason, maybe you don't have the currency or whatever, then they get cut off just like your cell phone gets cut off. I can see the possibility of them being used currently under normal situations. If you have like a search and rescue team or something, maybe. I think there's better options. But the main thing is they're not cheap, $100 to $200 for each little radio. And again, it's all tied to a grid, a system. So my advice as a prepper, stay away from those things. It's just, I know it makes it look so simple and easy, but I don't see the benefit, really. For most people, number one, before I say anything else, number one, you should get a ham radio license. There's no excuse not to. It's easier now than ever. You can, get the basic entry-level technician license. You don't even have to care about knowing about the interworkings of ham radio. Maybe you have no interest in understanding frequency modulations and how to build a radio from, scrap. And you don't care about that. You just want to be able to use a radio. Go get you a technician license. They're easy to do. There's free apps and free websites where you can take practice tests. Take those practice tests until you get at least an 80% average, and then take the test. You can do it online now. There's no excuse not to. So here's the thing. For those of you that say, oh, I'm just buying my radio and I'm going to put this radio in a shoebox somewhere, and when the doo-doo hits the fan, I'm going to pull it out and use it, is the same thing as saying, I'm going to buy this gun that I don't need. I'm not going to carry. I'm not going to practice with it. I'm not going to get to know it, get familiar with it. I'm just going to stick it away. And then when the doo-doo hits the fan, I'll pull it out and use it. Not good enough. You need to have a license so that you can be using it and understand the limitations and how it works, so that when you need to use it for life, sustaining reasons, you'll be proficient with it. That being said, you have family radio service, FRS radios. You have GMRS radios. You have ham radios. You also have MERS. It's kind of like FRS. The FRS and the MERS, you don't have to have a license. You can just go buy radios. The FRS radios, you can buy them at Walmart. They're like little walkie-talkies. I don't think that stuff's trash. I think that it can have a purpose in prepping. Again, you don't have to have a license. They're very, very limited. Their range is extremely limited. You'd be lucky in most situations to get a half a mile distance. So if you live in a neighborhood where people live close by and you've got connections and people and you're talking, you say, you know what, here, we should get some of these. They're $15-20 at Walmart. That way we can talk. In that situation, if the power goes out, if there's a storm or whatever, in that situation, an FRS and probably a MERS would be fine. GMRS has a little bit more, use. You can use there's more frequencies, there's more wattage that you can run. You do have to have a license. There's no test for that license. You just have to go and fill out a form online at the FCC's website, pay a fee, and you have a license. And a GMRS license covers your whole household. So it's not just for one person, it's the whole household. It's a good deal. Get one. It's not, people are like, oh, I'm giving the government my information. The government already has your information, all right? So I would get that. As far as handheld radios, which is what 99% of the preppers that aren't ham radio nerds are going to use, they are limited. And I don't care which ones you get. I don't care if you buy the cheap ones, the expensive ones, whatever. They're limited. Even the radios that we use in fire service, which are not the cheap ones, when we're using simplex, which is just radio to radio, there's times that they won't even reach half a mile. And there's times I can reach a few miles. The terrain has a lot to do with it. Now you have repeaters, which can extend that range a lot, but depending on the scenario in a grid down situation, those repeaters may not be working. So in the end, a handheld radio is for very local communication. I mean, I would not depend upon a handheld radio communicating more than 5 miles. I know it can. I know with the right antenna and the right setup, it can. But for the average person, I would never plan on this communicating past 5 miles. You can have mobile radios, which is like what you would put in your car, that can potentially transmit and receive further. As far as the cheap ones versus the good ones, I am not a radio snob. I have lots of Baofengs and Quanshangs and QYTs and TYTs. I've got probably 20 Baofengs along. If you don't know what that means, all that is those are all Chinese-made radios. They're very cheap Chinese-made radios. They do typically function. Sometimes some of them function better than others, but there's a reason why police, military, fire service, EMS, any type of professional industry does not use those radios, is because they're not reliable and they're not durable. So if for an emergency comm, buying a $20, $30 Chinese radio, whichever kind you want, I don't care, is fine. But you should not expect them or depend upon them to work through all kinds of disasters. If you wanted to have some Baofengs or Quanshangs or whatever you want, there's a whole bunch of them, and you wanted to have those, because this is what I use them for. I have them programmed and ready to go so that when the doo-doo hits the fan, I can hand them out to people that I know and trust that may not have a radio and say, hey, this is already programmed, let's communicate. and they'll be fine with that. But if you expect them to work after heavy use, don't expect that. I have many that have lasted 5-6 years, and I have others that will burn themselves out in the first week or two of playing with them. So that's the big thing with those cheap Chinese radios. It's not that they don't work. Yes, the sound is not good. They're not real clear. They can bleed over in frequencies. I get all that. But the big thing is that they're not durable. They're just not. Sometimes they last a long time. Sometimes they don't. Quality control for that Chinese radio stuff is horrible. So they're okay to get started with. They're okay to have an emergency radio. But if you expect to use them, for instance, if you wanted a radio, handheld radio that you could use right now on your homestead, you could use in your mag, you could have available, and maybe you want that thing to last for years until the doo-doo really does hit the fan, like fully hits the fan, and then be able to use it then too, I would not be getting a cheap Chinese radio. Probably the cheapest of the better ones would be like, this is an ICOM. You know, ICOMs, they're cheap comparatively. I mean, they're not as cheap as a Chinese radio, but compared to like a Kenwood or Motorola, they're cheaper. They work really well. They're typically waterproof. I've dropped them. I've done all kinds of things, and they still work. You get what you pay for. You just do. And if you're wanting a radio that's going to last much longer, that's going to be durable, I mean, there's a reason why the radios that the military use cost thousands of dollars a piece. There's a reason why the radios that most professional full-time fire service use cost $3,000-$5,000 a piece. There's a reason why the radios that the Forest Service and things like that, they cost $5,000-$10,000 a piece for one radio. It's because they last. They can drop them down a cliff and pick them up and they last. They can drop them in water and they last. They can drop them in fire and they last. They can drop them in oil and they last. You're not going to get that out of those cheap Chinese radios. You're just not. Even the ones that are waterproof, you're just not. And so you need to keep that in mind. I'm not saying don't get them. In fact, I'm saying you should still have a few around. And even with the tariffs, you can still get them not as cheap, but still decently cheap. I would have some, but it's a good idea to try to find some better quality ones. You can get them used on like eBay and stuff. You need a ham radio license so that you can be practicing with them. You can be establishing, how you're going to communicate. You're going to be able to know in your area where's the dead spots, all that kind of stuff. You need to be working on that. And so for each household, you can have an FRS, the little cheap radios you get at Walmart, to communicate with the people around your house or the people, your neighborhood or stuff. Those are more tactical radios. And then your ham radio, where maybe all the people that don't have licenses on their FRS are communicating with the one or two people in the group that have a ham radio. Those ham radios are more strategic. They're the ones that's able to search and scan more frequencies, talk to more people on different frequencies. And in developing a system like that for your family and for your team, I think can work well. The bottom line is you need to have radios, and having radios to communicate with each other and having communicate like within your home and the people around you. Getting something that's going to communicate many, 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 many miles, like across state lines and stuff, that's where you're getting into a whole different level. Yes, they exist. I have those too, but there's a whole big technical learning curve that you're going to have to do, and higher ham radio licensing. And so if you're trying to find something, you have no knowledge and you just want to be able to talk to your kids 2 states over, it's not going to happen easily. So focus on immediately around you. Anything under 5 miles, you can find cheap radios to do that. And then you start practicing. You start to get to know how to work them. There's some great videos out there. Don't be afraid of them. Just get the hang of it. I would focus on GMRS and FRS. Get your ham radio license. There may be some repeaters in your area. Probably there are. although there seems to be less and less of those anymore. And then you can get your ham out, your ham radio, and you can start communicating that way. If nothing else, just listen. It's not that difficult. It's not. Get on Amazon or eBay or wherever and look for GMRS radios. Most of those are pre-programmed. And FRS radios, those are pre-programmed. And at least you can communicate with people immediately around you. Maybe you can buy a few of them and just give them to them. Give them as a gift. Say, hey, put this away. So when things get bad, we've got a way to communicate. But if it's over 4 or 5 miles, it's probably not going to happen. All right, folks, I hope that helps. If you have any questions, I will do my best to answer them in the comments. It's time to get your houses in order and prepare yourselves mentally, physically, and spiritually. Thanks for watching. Catch you in the next video.